what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead.
6114, 3102, 1089.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now.
St. Louis is a city of extremes. For me, this is one of the friendliest cities in America. It's also America's murder capital. There are more homicides per capita here than in any other U.S. city. Around half of them never get solved. But there are also more theater seats per capita than almost any other city in America. St. Louis's proud musical heritage takes in jazz and blues, early hip-hop, and classical music. You can find some of America's most opulent neighborhoods here, right next to some of the most deprived.
It's not the same for you and me. They write the checks, all eulogies, no money.
My name is Nato Caliph. I'm a hip-hop artist, activist, and proud father. I was born and raised in St. Louis, and now I'm on a journey through the contradictions that make up this city, to try and understand America's ongoing problem with race. I want my children to grow up in a different St. Louis than I did. And that means I need to have some tough conversations with people in charge of this city. We're traveling along Route 66, nearly 4,000 kilometers of historic tarmac that once stretched from Los Angeles to Chicago. Route 66 used to pass through St. Louis, the city they called the gateway to the West. These days, Route 66 is largely gone, a reminder of the bygone era. It exists in remnants and nostalgic memories. When you approached St. Louis, you first had to cross the Mississippi River. Back when Route 66 was America's main street, this bridge was the gateway to St. Louis. At about a mile long, it stands roughly 60 feet above the mighty Mississippi. But what makes this bridge unusual is that it doesn't go in a straight line. When they built this bridge, it turned out the riverbed wasn't strong enough to support it. So engineers had to change their plans. Urban planning has never been our strong point here in St. Louis. I'm proud of my city, but we do have a lot of problems here. One of our biggest problems is what we call the Delmare Divide. Delmare Boulevard cuts through the center of the city, a visible line separating the haves from the have-nots. To the south, you see upscale houses, art galleries, and antique shops. Drive a couple of blocks north, and the character of the city changes.
Where I lived, just south of Delmare, we could hear the gunshots coming from north of Delmare. As you drive up, you'll start to see like the difference in development. And the north is where there's like less development, and the south is generally where there's been more.
From the air, the Delmare Divide is clear to see. The neighborhood north of Delmare Boulevard is 99% black. To the south, it's 70% white. House prices are nearly 5 times larger to the south of Delmare than to the north. And if you live south of Delmare Boulevard, you're 7 times more likely to have a bachelor's degree than to the north. It feels like there's a narrowing of possibilities once you cross over Delmare Boulevard, and many residents here feel powerless.
It's the color of your skin at the end of the day. And nobody's gonna make me believe any different. It's the color of your skin and it's economics. I'm treated different because I am black.
Who say St. Louis ain't got it? Stop it. Book smart, street smart, the block or college. And this raps, it's my profit. Deep in the underground, I'm solid with no help, I got this.
The U.S. Supreme Court made it illegal to deny housing to minorities based on their race back in 1917. But a century later, the racial divide in St. Louis stubbornly persists. Banks and real estate agents continue to drive blacks and whites into different areas.
I'm in a real estate now that I'm in real estate. I'm raw to the end with beef. I put my whole career at stake.
Prophet is a real estate agent who sells homes north and south of the Delmare Divide. He's also a talented freestyle MC.
They rent to own your chromosomes when they sold you them homes. The government attacks you with mortgage loads and property you don't actually own. On the east side, they get it poppin', they'll kill your boys. The gunshots are so loud, but they deal with the Illinois. Ferguson, since the murdering, they never stopped the killing. If you say they did, you're lying through your teeth like Darren Wilson's fillings. Where high property values lie, there's lies and racial divide. Where the property value is high, they don't property value a life. Heroin's an epidemic, let the fiends just tell it best. Oxycontin's a gateway drug in the gateway to the west. State.
As you drive along Delmare Boulevard, you can almost sense the frustration that people feel here. Denied opportunities, some people choose a path of violence and crime. Others channel their frustration into activism and music.
My hip hop is about, I'm all about trying to educate people. I'm trying to make people aware of what's going on. It's a knowledge-based hip hop.
The underground hip hop scene in St. Louis doesn't get as much exposure as in other cities. But I believe we have some of the most talented artists around here. Our lyrics reflect problems we see in our city.
And I've had everything from like crosses burning in my yard, kids breaking into my house, police blaming it on me. This is literally as a kid. I'm like 12, 13, and like swastikas drawn on the concrete in front of our crib and stuff. I didn't feel anything until I got older, and then I understood what was going on. You know, like being 6, 7, 8 years old in that environment, you're just like, why don't they like us? But in reality is like, once you get older, you'll get the real reasoning.
I tell them, look, keep looking, listen, observe, then know.
Chuck D of Public Enemy called hip-hop the ghetto CNN. And that's kind of how we view it too. It's a platform to express yourself and spread your message.
Starts with anything, with many king, brought, taught, beginnings cream.
I can come up with a line or a verse, and I put it to a nice beat, and it can reach out and touch someone in a whole nother country, a whole nother continent. And I can influence the way they live and operate. And for some people that's awesome, and for others that's scary. Like, you know, middle America may not want this black guy from St. Louis City influencing, you know, their suburban child. They may not want that.
Just a couple hundred yards south of Delmare Boulevard is a street full of expensive restaurants, antique dealers, and art galleries. I've come to visit one of them to ask how they feel about living on the front line of the Delmare Divide.
This is one of the wealthiest enclaves in St. Louis. We have the huge mansions just right across over there. These are grand mansions of the Gilded Age. But if you literally go 1 block to the north, which we've called the Delmare Divide here in St. Louis, it looks like Beirut. It looks like a bombed out neighborhood of crumbling buildings, and it's a tragedy.
Gallery owner Philip Sline believes political geography has a lot to do with St. Louis's racial problems. St. Louis County is divided into 90 different municipalities, each with their own police force and mayor's office. 22 of these municipalities have a population of less than 1,000 people. These smaller municipalities receive up to 40% of their income from from fines collected for petty offenses and traffic violations.
You know, the little communities that we have, the little fiefdom communities, I think one of the best things that the city could do is merge with the county and get rid of all these little municipalities that are pulling folks over and getting them trapped in these court, like, you know, with tickets and speeding, and they compound and then they lose their job. I mean, we got to do better than that, for sure.
I'm on my way to perhaps the best known of St. Louis County's small municipalities. This was the place where the racial divide in St. Louis exploded into view. A white police officer fatally shot an unarmed black teenager named Michael Brown in 2014. What happened next was broadcast around the world. Like many others in the St. Louis music scene, I went along to protest. I even took my children. I felt it was important to witness a moment that many call the second wave of the civil rights movement. Today I'm returning to the scene of Michael Brown's shooting to talk to another artist who was at the protest, but he doesn't believe the right lessons have been learned from Ferguson.
The issue is America doesn't want to have a conversation on race. We'll talk about everything else. We'll talk about anything else. But when it's time to talk about the fact that we refuse to acknowledge people of color in America as human beings, then all of a sudden you're harping on the past. Slavery is behind us and whatnot. But I can't go through certain places without being profiled. I have 2 degrees. I have no criminal record, and I've been pulled over in multiple municipalities. What does that say about America? When you can't even see my accomplishments to see me as a person, you only see me because of my color.
Since the Ferguson protests, there's been a growth in grassroots activism and community volunteering in St. Louis. People are deciding to take matters into their own hands and do what they can to support the city's most neglected communities. We're headed to an area just north of Delmare Boulevard that becomes a no-go zone after dark. Drive-by shootings are an almost daily occurrence here. Drug dealing and prostitution are rife, but one man has decided to walk the streets, talking to people and handing out food parcels and blankets.
I found you!
Risking his own life with only a clerical collar for protection.
I did a couple of funerals of young people. One in particular, a young lady, Jennifer Dorsey, who was shot in the head in broad daylight, Rumbold Park over in the JBL in front of her children. And I'm a pretty decent speaker, and I shared all these eloquent words, and I watched a grandmother just really, really lament over the body of a granddaughter. And that just seemed so unnatural to me. And I remember feeling like a hypocrite. If you believe that Christ died, that he defeated death, stayed in the ground for 3 days, got up, talked to his friends, and flew off like Superman, which is essentially what he did. Now, I believe that. So if I have faith to believe that, I should be exercising my faith in a more profound way. And this is that way to me, that I have to do this, or I'm a hypocrite. Just that simple.
Reverend McCoy has been walking these streets for nearly 3 years. In that time, he's gotten to know many of the people who end up in one of America's most violent neighborhoods.
It's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. The violence, not to minimize it, but the violence is to be expected. These are human beings. Someone asked me once, man, why do you walk over on that street? Because they're human beings on that street. And so after you've done this a while and you develop these relationships, you feel they're hurt.
It's hard not to feel sorry for the people who end up here. Did they choose this life? Or did this life choose them? The next morning, I woke up feeling inspired by Reverend McCoy's work, but angry that things had been allowed to get to this point in the city that I love. Who was responsible for this racial segregation in St. Louis? My mind was full of questions, and I needed some answers. We contacted 6 police departments in St. Louis County to ask for an explanation. 5 said no, but 1 said yes. Have you seen a sense of division in the community? Do you see that at all?
Not in Creve Coeur. We're a very multicultural city. We certainly have different types of races and cultures represented here. I don't see that division here. I don't see, we don't experience any animosities among our groups that are here. A large portion of incidents happen when there's non-compliance. And when non-compliance happens, the officers have somewhat of a duty to respond to that non-compliance if somebody is under arrest. And it becomes a vicious cycle of non-compliance creates more force creates possibly more non-compliance, and it becomes could be devastating for either. And so what we would promote is this. Like I said, we expect our officers to be respectful, professional, and to approach these situations in a lawful manner. And if they do that, we expect the person to comply with the officer's lawful demands. And if they do that, there's a huge success rate and a very low possibility that anyone's going to get hurt, injured, or anything like that. So that's what we really want.
So you don't feel like as though like there's an overarching fear with compliance based on the history of abuse of power?
Now, I do understand that there are times, I would say not in this department, but there are times when if someone might have a fear of police for some reason, and they may flee, run, or resist, that creates problems. But hopefully we can reestablish that legitimacy and that trust so that when people comply, they have a day in court, they can explain, and no one would get hurt.
So there's this perception that there's sort of this fraternal order / brotherhood within law enforcement that almost regardless of what happens, you kind of stick together and you know, almost right or wrong, you kind of band together and you support each other as officers.
There is a brotherhood in police because we do a tough job. We are out there 24/7 at very dangerous situations. We have to have each other's back on a dangerous call to where we're going to be there for the officer. If they feel like there's a brotherhood where people are covering up for each other, I can tell you that does not happen here, and here's why. We stress ethical behavior, and we look for officers who are going to be, like I said, professional and ethical.
I've never interviewed a police officer before, and I don't know if I ever will again. I don't think that his answers were, I don't want to say they were disingenuous. I just don't think that they were like more in line with what's really happening or what's really going on.
It seems as though the geography of St. Louis, with its 90 municipalities, can be used by some as a way to avoid being held accountable. Creve Coeur may be a model of good policing, but then why do so many people blame the police for St. Louis's problem? It's time to speak to the man who was in charge of St. Louis while I was a child. The man who was in charge during an epidemic of violence and drug selling in the city. Vincent Shamel, 3-term mayor of St. Louis City in the 1980s and 90s.
Ferguson was the alarm clock that woke up America. People know 2 things around the world about St. Louis. They know the Arch and they know Ferguson. And I think if you take Ferguson as sort of the starting point, and then you watch the things that happened around the country after Ferguson, it's pretty clear that tragedy drew a line in the sand for this country. We're going to have to sort it out. We're going to have to sort it out in St. Louis. We're going to have to sort it out in this country.
So you were in charge of St. Louis for 12 years. What would be the reason why you could not fix things?
Well, first of all, I don't think there was as much consciousness about this racial issue. I would argue that I did fix some of it. The neighborhood I live in became the first truly integrated neighborhood in the city. The other, and I think more important thing, is that up until 4 years ago, the state of Missouri controlled the police department in the city of St. Louis. During the Civil War, literally going back to the Civil War, the legislature took control of the police department in St. Louis because it was a union-focused city. And they didn't want us to have an armed body, and so they took control of the police department. That remained until 4 years ago. I think Mayor Ferguson has an opportunity now, especially post-Ferguson, new police chief coming on board, a new consciousness. I think there really is an opportunity to make some changes that are just frankly long overdue. The only way to fix this is to face the fact that racism is part of America's story, and then address it with a conscious effort to make sure that it stops.
So looking back at your time as mayor in the city of St. Louis, were there things that you felt you could have done differently?
The things that I wish I had been able to do really relate to neighborhoods. We did create a number of integrated neighborhoods in St. Louis. And I think we made some real progress on the integration of the city. I guess my biggest failings or things that I wish I could have moved the needle on more would have been public education. It just, to me, it is everything. We can change the world if we can change the way in which we educate youngsters.
St. Louis may have its problems, but there are also people trying to fix them. Speaking to the people in charge, I didn't get the sense that there was a conspiracy to keep minorities down. Just a few bad apples in the police force, a county government in need of reform, and the weight of history. What can we do to fix things? The same thing we've always been doing: expressing ourselves, holding people accountable, and keep making sweet music. The Cinco de Mayo festival shows St. Louis at its best. It's a Mexican holiday attended by people of all races and ages, coming together to have fun and listen to some great acts. The only violence here is in the wrestling ring, and the Donald Trump piñata is sure to take a beating. Many people are optimistic about St. Louis's future. Just off Delmare Boulevard, the newly regenerated cultural district is attracting a new generation of music lovers to some of the best venues around. Education reform is also happening. This school, which sits right on the Delmare Divide, is one of the most diverse in the city and is home to some of St. Louis's most gifted children. Royce only started playing the piano just 3 years ago, but he's dedicated to following the beat of Beethoven.
You want to be defiant of like stereotypes or stigmas that's placed on like certain genres of music. So like, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't, because I got on a gold chain, I wouldn't be playing Beethoven. I don't know. I guess that's the stigma or the stereotype, but it's a universal language. So because it's a universal language, I mean that it's not only exclusive to certain type of people or people who only look a certain type of way. You get it?
And in St. Louis City, a new administration is pledged to work with equality activists to make sure the lessons of Ferguson are learned. New Mayor Nato Caliph has even appointed one Ferguson activist as a senior advisor.
I know that those in power recognize that this is a critical issue for our region, and I would say that I'm working there and that I have this position is a sign that they're taking it seriously. I think, as with anything, your actions have to speak louder than your words, but the indications that we've had so far are that there's a recognition that this is something that our leadership has to lead in and needs to be addressed.
In this city, the politicians recognize that things have to change. But we're not the only ones with problems. There are issues across America, and they're not going away. Still, nearly 100 years after the Route 66 signs first went up, St. Louis stands at a crossroads. A new administration has a chance to change things for everyone here. Are there obstacles ahead? Absolutely. But if we stay true to the spirit of St. Louis, I think we can get there.